Okay, everyone, welcome back to Sports and Money with Ben Parker. Hope you're having a great day. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to Pittsburgh and talk about the Steelers today, specifically all the contract restructuring that they've done during this offseason. Over the past few weeks, past couple of months, they've actually restructured several players, several veteran players, in an effort to save cap space. All of this is in an effort to try to still get a chance at a Super Bowl while that window of winning is still open, and that window is closing. Whenever Ben Roethlisberger decides to hang it up, be that 1 season from now or 5 seasons from now, whenever he decides to hang it up, there's a good chance that window will close for at least a couple of seasons. We'll talk about that more in future videos, but today I want to talk about the contract restructurings. I want to talk about restructuring in general, but this will all be through the lens of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Right here are the 4 veteran players that the Steelers decided to restructure: Antonio Brown, Stephon Tuitt, David DeCastro, and Alejandro Villanueva. All 4 of these players saved the Steelers a ton of cap space simply by restructuring. We'll look at why the players would want to do that in just a minute, but first of all, let's look at how much they saved. Antonio Brown saved the Steelers this offseason, this 2018 year, $9.7 million in cap space simply by restructuring. Stephon Tuitt, almost the same thing, $8.2 million simply by restructuring. David DeCastro, $5.1 million by restructuring. And then Alejandro Villanueva, $3.5 million by restructuring. All told, these 4 players saved the Pittsburgh Steelers roughly $28 million in salary cap. Why did the Steelers need that? I'm not going to talk about why all teams might want to do that, but why did the Steelers need that? Because they were way over the salary cap heading into this offseason. The players' contracts were growing. They were way over the cap. They still had their draft class to sign. They were hoping to at least dip their foot into the pool a little bit on free agency, not a lot. They obviously couldn't afford any of the heavy hitters in free agency, but just a little bit. You can always clear cap space by releasing players, but the Steelers already have a good team and a lot of good players, and they're trying to keep as many of those guys as they can. So they wound up restructuring these 4 guys, saving $28 million. Now, why would the players want to do that? Why would Antonio Brown, Tuitt, or any of these other guys, why would they ever want to restructure their contract? And the answer is this: they are getting more guaranteed money to do so. That's not necessarily needed in the NBA or Major League Baseball. You go over to those sports, those contracts are guaranteed. For the NFL, and it's an injury-prone league, it is a devastatingly injury-prone league where you know that you are always 1 play away from never playing again, from never again stepping on the field. Or you're 1 play away from being out for 18 months on rehab and then trying to restart your career again a year and a half older. So it's a tough proposition, but for players, if you can get more guaranteed money out of their team, then you are more than happy to try to restructure your contract. Now, the next question is this: are there any risks or downsides for restructuring? And there are. For the team, if you restructure too many players, what happens is their salary cap number may shrink in that 1 season, and it does. Antonio Brown, for instance, was going to have a salary cap number of about $17 million this season. Thanks to his restructure, his salary cap number is just over $7 million. So he saves the team about $9.7 million this offseason. For 19, 20, and 21, however, his salary cap number actually grows, which means the Steelers have to pay him more money while giving less money to somebody else on the team. So for any NFL team, if they're going to restructure, they can do it, but you are pushing some of that money onto future years, and you'll have to deal with that in future salary caps. So you can do some of it, but you can't afford to do a lot of it because your salary cap is simply going to be too large in years to come. Also, there's a downside for the players potentially. If the players restructure their contracts too much, even though they're getting larger guaranteed money, during that last season or 2, their contract may be backloaded. That is, they may simply have a salary cap number that's too large, and the team may simply cut them in their last season or 2. which may or may not be a problem for the player. If they can go out on free agency and get just as good a deal for what they already had, then they're going to actually benefit from that. If, however, they've already moved past their best playing days, they have to get out on the free agent market, they may get a far less deal. So the players really have to keep an eye on that as well. Generally speaking, though, if you're in a 3, 4, 5 year contract, you're making good money, you're healthy, you're always willing to restructure in order to get a higher amount of guaranteed money. You're not going to lose any money in the big picture, more than likely, if you and your agent are managing that correctly. Now, those are the 4 players that restructured for the Steelers. Where's all this money going? That's a great question. Here's where it's going, to the top salaries of the players that the Steelers already have. These are the cap numbers, the 5 highest cap numbers for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Ben Roethlisberger making $23.2 million this season. $23.2 million. It's not a big cap number for a quarterback. Matter of fact, it's being eclipsed by several other quarterbacks already. Nonetheless, it is a huge cap number for a team to carry. Le'Veon Bell, $14.5 million. That's a very large cap number for a running back. If any running back is worth it, Bell is, but a lot of teams elect not to pay that kind of money to a running back. Hayward, making $12.5 million. Hayden, $11.9 million. Pouncey, $10.5 million. These are unusually large salaries to be collected onto one team. Now, the Steelers have done something that a lot of other teams have elected not to do, and that is not to pay this many top players these huge contracts, these huge numbers. Other teams, and this varies from team to team, no team is consistent, other teams elect to simply pay only 2 or 3 players this kind of money, or maybe 4. The Steelers this season had about 7 players. Brown was making 17 this offseason. He'll be making 22 next season, 21-22. Same thing for Tuitt, was way up there. De Castro, same thing. So the Steelers really had about 7 or 8 players that were getting these huge cap numbers. As they grow each season, you either have to get rid of someone or you have to restructure. One last question is this. Restructuring, the way the Steelers are doing, is that a sign of mismanagement? Is that a sign that somehow the Pittsburgh Steelers have poorly managed their salary cap and that's why they're up against it? And the answer is not necessarily. If you're a good team, and this is true of almost any good team in the NFL, if you are a good team, you're going to have a lot of good players, and those good players are going to be paid a significant amount of money. So if you're a good team with good players, you're always going to be right there, right up against the salary cap almost every season. The Steelers are a little bit of an extreme example of that because they've had these players and they're trying to keep this core together for another season or 2, as long as they have Ben Roethlisberger. They are trying to keep this group together. As soon as Roethlisberger leaves, you'll see the Steelers cut ties with a couple of these players and begin to do a little bit of a rebuild. How big of a rebuild depends on some other things, some of the drafting that the Steelers have done as well. So one thing that they could always do, players don't want to do this, agents hate this, the players union hates this as well. Teams can always come to these players here and say, hey, we would like to keep you on the team. We would also like to sign some other good players. How about renegotiating, and we'll simply pay you less money, period. Players don't like that. The players union doesn't like that. It's really difficult for teams to talk players into that. So your only other option is I either restructure some guys or I cut some people loose. And the Steelers have had to cut a couple people loose as well, but not their top guys that they have tried to keep. So that's contract restructuring in a really quick nutshell. That's the Pittsburgh Steelers restructuring this offseason in a really quick nutshell. In the next video we're going to take a look at the draft and how the Steelers have decided to handle their draft based on their financial numbers that they're looking at during the next couple of off seasons. All right, Sports and Money, Ben Parker. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.